So far, we haven't really organized our code in the playground very efficiently. But that doesn't really matter because we've only had very small snippets. But when we come to program real stuff, we can't have just one big block. So what we're going to learn about is how functions allow us to organize the code better and more efficiently so we can read it, other people can read it, and it just helps organize your brain in a brain mappy kind of way so you understand what's going on after a few months when you haven't looked at your code. Rather than having a big spaghetti mess, you'll have neat little functions. So open up Playgrounds and let's look at how to do that. Right, so a central tenet of a function is so that we can organize our code, but also they exist so that we don't have to write code twice. Here's a little tip. If you ever find yourself writing code twice when you're programming, stop what you're doing and reorganize it. You should never write code twice. So let's look at how a function helps us avoid that problem. We define a function by typing the word func. And of course, Swift is telling us I expect an identifier in the function declaration. That, in English, simply means I want you to give this a name. So let's call this function checkCount. Open and close brackets, and that signifies that this is a function. You might also call this a method. Different languages slightly call them different things. So C# you would call it a method. Open our curly brace and close it. Now all of the code we're going to put inside of here belongs to this function, and the code won't execute unless we call this function, and we'll see how to do that in a bit. But for now, let's write some code. Let's say var count, we should be used to this by now, int is equal to 0, and let's create our repeat loop. This is good practice for us. We want to print not yet, and we're going to add 1 to our count. And don't forget, this comes with a while the count is less than something. Right, so we have our function. So what's happened? Well, nothing's happened because this code will not execute by itself unless we call this function. And calling a function is pretty easy. All we have to do is type checkCount, open and close brackets, and it will fire that function once. Notice how it's fired out our not yet's 10 times. Now that's a bit difficult to see, so what we'll do is we'll reduce this to 3. So it will fire that 3 times. That's easy to count. Okay, and then underneath there, we might put a print done and put a lot of dots so we can see that clearly. So we should have some not yet's and a done. Right, so that function has fired once, and that's brilliant. We could actually fire that again somewhere else. checkCount. Now watch what happens. It's fired twice. So you can see by having our code stored away in this function, we can access it easily by simply calling the name of the function. But that's not even the best thing about functions yet. Let's remove this one. Let's drop that a bit. Functions, inside of these 2 brackets here, we can pass over a piece of data, and that data could actually be anything that we want to pass over. So let's tell our function we're going to give it a message. And this message is of type string. So it's got this string. Now, if we look down here where we call checkCount, it says we're missing an argument for parameter message and call. An argument is simply what that is called. These are called arguments. I don't know why. If someone can tell me, please do. And it's telling us we haven't actually sent anything over, and that's what our checkCount is expecting. So what do? Well, let's send it over. Message, not yet. Now we've passed over this not yet message. So it goes here, it gets passed over here. Now we can use it. Instead of printing not yet, we can simply print the message. And that gives us the same result. So we're passing data over to the function. And of course, we can run that with whatever message we feel like, and it will print that out. So I hope you can start to see the advantages of functions. Now, we don't actually have to just send one argument. We can send as many as we like, although I'd advise against sending tons and tons, because that means your program is not well structured. But for now, let's send 2. Let's send over an integer, which we will, of course, call count, and let's say 9. And we should get an error. It tells us we don't actually have that because we haven't implemented it up here. So let's do that. Count as an integer. Now we will use this count to tell us how many times to do the loop. So first of all, we have a conflict. So this count cannot be the same name as this count. That is actually a problem. So what we'll do is we will change the name of this one to end count. And we'll change it here. End count. So you've got to be careful with those clashes sometimes. So now our end count we can put down here. Instead of 3, we just drop in end count. And this will go round the number of times we specify in end count. Look at that. It's gone round 9 times. If I said go round twice, I think you can guess what's going to happen. Right. So what else are we going to talk about here? We're actually going to talk about the names. These names should be descriptive, but also as short as you can make them. So we don't want check count of the hot dogs in stand, because that's, well, it's just ridiculous. So you would just have check count. You might have check count hot dogs or count hot dogs. And that's probably a better one. We can have count hot dogs or whatever it is. So you should make it short, but as descriptive as you can within that. Right, now there's one other thing that we should cover in functions. Well, there are tons, but we're only going to cover one basic. A function can give you something back, which is referred to as a return value. So let's say we wanted to send over a message once we were finished here. We need to tell our function that it's going to send back, and this is dash, triangular bracket. We tell it what we're sending back. We're going to send back a string. Now, hopefully we should get an error because it says we're missing return in a function expected to return string. And that's saying you've told me you're going to return this, but you haven't actually given me anything to return. So what we're going to do, instead of doing print done, we're going to return our string, and that could be whatever we need. We can say completed. Now completed won't print down here in our little inspector thing, but completed will print here, as we can see here. So we've returned a string once our function has finished. This is an important concept because when you go off, say, to your server, you grab some data in your function, eventually you're going to return that to your main program. And this is more or less how you're going to do it. It's not the only way. There are many other ways, but this is the basic way of doing it. Now, because we're returning a variable, we can actually assign it as a var. Var result equals completed, and then result itself is a string, which is completed. So that's how we can get variables back, right? That's the very basics of functions sorted. Congratulations! You made it to the end of this video, which puts you in the top 10% of my viewers. For each one of you, there are 9 others who didn't make it this far. That perseverance you've shown means that you're much more likely to succeed as a developer. Now, to help you on your way, I want to give you the next part of my iOS course completely free. No trials, no credit cards, instant access. Simply click the link below the video to ensure that you don't miss out.